My husband asked for a divorce, saying I was a negligent mother. In court, in front of the judge, my daughter asked whether negligent was a new word for a mom who does everything on her own. It is not the kind of sentence a 7-year-old child should say with such calm, with her legs swinging from the high chair. Her blue dress all wrinkled exactly on the side I had ironed more carefully. But that was how everything really began to fall apart for him and, curiously, to be rebuilt for me. When I think about our story, I don't think first of betrayal, shouting, or some big cinematic scandal. Think of dishes. Dirty dishes in the sink, piled up, balancing like a game of chance. It always goes like this. No one tells you that a marriage starts dying with the sound of cutlery clinking on china at 11 at night, while someone washes and the other walks past without saying thank you. I was the one who washed. Giulio was the one who walked past, already in his pajamas, his phone in his hand, talking about meetings, targets, bonuses, as if the only serious thing in the world was his job. Our home, seen from the outside, was impeccable. A flat in a nice neighborhood, light curtains, plants on the balcony, a fridge covered in travel magnets. No one saw how many times I ate standing up in front of the stove because I had to play airplane with mashed potatoes for Beatrice at the same time. No one saw how many times I showered with the door open because she had a fever and I needed to hear if her breathing changed. Giulio said I was overdoing it, that I was anxious, that other mothers were more relaxed. He loved that word, relaxed, as if it were a spiritual compliment, a silent religion. In theory, I was supposed to be relaxed while I booked the pediatrician during my work break, answered emails with one hand and held Beatrice with the other, because she was having nightmares. I worked part-time in an architecture studio. I loved it, at least at the beginning. Clean lines, floor plans, ideas taking shape. But after Beatrice was born, everything became a sort of constant negotiation. Reduced hours, delays justified by dark circles, breaks taken with guilt. When I got home, Giulio was usually already there. Jacket hanging on the back of the chair, laptop open, face of a modern martyr. "Rough day," he would say, as if it weren't always. I'd put my bag in one corner, my coat in another, take off my shoes and start the night shift. Dinner, bath, backpack for the next day, uniform, school notebook. He sometimes helped, of course. Once a week, sometimes twice, he would cook dinner and post a photo on Instagram. "Chef for one night, my family deserves the best. 2 pots, a pretty filter, 50 likes. The rest of the week was on me and went nowhere. The curious thing is that for a long time I believed that story myself. Me, a bit dramatic perfectionist, overloaded because I wanted to be. Him, the hands-on father for our times, who helped out. That word, help, should have been the first red flag. You help those you're not responsible for. A husband doesn't help around the house. He does his share. A father doesn't help with his child. He looks after them. But the truth is I was too tired to start a debate about semantics. Things began to crack like old tiles when Beatrice turned 5. That was when Giulio's late meetings started to coincide with deleted messages on his phone, shirts smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, and a sudden enthusiasm for the gym at 7 in the morning. I saw it. Of course I saw it. It isn't hard to see when the person you've slept next to for almost 10 years starts laughing in a different way while looking at a screen. What's hard is not seeing. It's admitting it. At that time, Beatrice started having asthma attacks. Nothing dramatic, according to the lung specialist, but enough to make the nights even more fragmented. I slept lightly in slices, listening to her breathing down the hallway. Giulio, by some selective miracle, never heard a thing. One night, at 3 in the morning, Beatrice woke up short of breath, eyes wide open, and I rushed her to the emergency room. Called him 5 times. He answered on the 6th, his voice thick. "What is it now, Marta?" As if I had scheduled an asthma attack just to disturb His Excellency's sleep. The next morning he showed up at the hospital with messy hair and a coffee in his hand. Beatrice was already better, with a new inhaler in her bag. He looked at me as if I were a logistical problem. "Couldn't you have waited a bit? You always exaggerate, Marta. Doctors will tell you anything to calm you down. That's how you raise Beatrice in a bubble." Beatrice was there, hearing everything, teddy bear in her lap. I didn't answer. I just filed the word exaggerate away in a corner of my mind, next to relaxed. The first time he used the word negligent was during an apparently trivial argument, on some ordinary Tuesday. Beatrice had spilled juice on the living room rug. Nothing serious, nothing irreparable, just a badly placed glass in hands that were too small. I was in the kitchen washing my hands, and when I came back I heard the shout. Beatrice! How many times have I told you to be careful? Your mother lets you do anything. Then I'm the bad guy. She started crying, more frightened by his tone than by the juice. I knelt down, cleaned it up, hugged her. It was an accident, Giulio. He looked at me with that polished contempt that only someone who feels morally superior can muster. Of course, Marta. With you it's always an accident. Never a lack of boundaries. You are negligent. The word fell between us like a glass shattering. I could have laughed, I could have snapped back, I could have thrown in his face all those nights at the bar, the deleted messages, the fact that I was the one who always booked appointments, vaccinations, parent-teacher meetings. But I just stared at him, holding Beatrice, wet cloth in my hand. He went on. You like being this overprotective and at the same time distracted mother, don't you? She climbs wherever she wants, touches whatever she wants. You're on your phone or thinking about work and you think hugging her afterwards fixes everything. In that moment, I realized something inside him had flipped a switch. He was no longer talking to me as his wife. He was talking like someone who was already building a case file. I just didn't know what for yet. The divorce request came 2 months later, in the same professional tone he used when signing contracts. We were at the kitchen table, Beatrice at a friend's house, me sorting through bills. He put a black folder in front of me. We need to talk seriously. I laughed nervously. For a second I thought you were going to tell me you were pregnant. He didn't laugh. I want a divorce, Marta. Just like that. No beating around the bush, no preamble, no, it's not you, it's me. He spoke Italian as if he were presenting a report. It doesn't work anymore. We fight too much, you're always tense, always hysterical. It's bad for Beatrice. I stayed silent. My body went into that strange mode where everything slows down, as if the mind were filming in slow motion to make sure it isn't misunderstanding. You want a divorce. He felt relieved, as if I had just signed the minutes of the meeting. Yes, it will be better for everyone. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I think it's fairer if Beatrice stays with me. That was when the world snapped back to normal speed. Sorry, what? He folded his arms, that gesture I knew well from condo meetings where he went to mediate conflicts. You heard me. I want primary custody. You work, you're always tired, you forget things. It's not fair to leave all the responsibility to you. You are, how do you say, negligent sometimes. It's curious how some people confuse convenience with justice. He didn't want custody out of a sudden surge of paternal love. He wanted control. He wanted the perfect story. The responsible father rescuing his daughter from the disorganized mother. I asked in the calmest voice I could manage. And does Beatrice know? He hesitated for half a second, just enough for me to understand. She's a child, Marta. We decide for her. In the days that followed, the house turned into a minefield. Giulio started registering everything. Schedules, delays, small slip UPS. If I turned up 10 minutes late to pick Beatrice up from school because the bus broke down, he would put on his martyr face and comment loudly in front of her. See, Beatrice, this is why Dad prefers to do things on his own. Mom is always scatterbrained. If I said no to ice cream before dinner, he bought it in secret and whispered, "Don't tell Mom or she'll make a scene." It was a delicate sabotage, made of tiny gestures, specks of rust he scattered between me and my daughter. When the divorce papers arrived, they came with an extra surprise. He had filed for sole custody. In the documents, I was described as emotionally unstable, anxious, disorganized, unable to provide a structured environment for the child. There were printed emails where I confided my exhaustion to a friend, messages where I complained about his lack of help, Even a voice note of me crying in the office bathroom because the pediatrician had suggested therapy for Beatrice. In the lawyer's hands, everything had been rearranged as proof of my supposed fragility. I remember my first meeting with my lawyer, Lucia, a small, thin woman with delicate frames and eyes that saw more than people said. She read Giulio's request with her eyebrow slightly raised. It's interesting how every fact here is emotionally true but legally distorted. She pointed with her pen. Here you say you feel exhausted and overwhelmed. He nodded. Yes, I felt that way. And here he uses that as proof that you can't look after your daughter. She sighed. It's a common strategy. Turn the vulnerability you shared into a weapon against you. I left her office with a folder of documents, a list of things to gather, medical certificates, school reports, witnesses, and a new sensation of lucid fury. Had been naive, yes. I had believed that talking about my tiredness was asking for help, not arming an enemy. Now I had to learn to treat the man I had slept beside for years as what he had chosen to become. An opponent. Beatrice, in the middle of it all, was an island trying not to be split in two. Giulio started picking her up more often to spend quality time. I saw the signs. Expensive toys out of nowhere, chocolate at odd hours, new nicknames. She came home smelling of fancy cars and another woman's perfume. One day, while I was brushing her hair, I noticed a different shampoo smell. It's from Dad's house. Chiara has it. Chiara. The name slipped neatly into the space of many silences. I knew her from photos never shown, only guessed. The brilliant colleague, the marketing consultant who appears in party stories, the earring that wasn't mine in the glove compartment. I asked, neutral. Who is Chiara? Beatrice shrugged. She's Dad's friend. She makes better pasta than you, but don't tell her I told you. That was when I understood the whole game. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a gradual replacement. Negligent mother out, organized stepmother in, heroic dad in the spotlight. And in the middle, a child too clever not to feel the change, but too small to name it. The custody hearing was set for a Thursday morning. Until then, I lived like someone walking along the ledge of a tall building. Every gesture of mine felt like potential evidence. I wrote everything down. School times, fevers, notes, who picked her up, who dropped her off. Lucia said the court's like paperwork, not tears. I tried to believe her. On the day I woke up at 5. Not because I needed to, but because my body didn't know how to sleep. I made Beatrice's breakfast, laid out her uniform with almost ritual care, tied her hair into a ponytail she undid in 2 minutes. I want to go with my hair down like Rapunzel, she declared, looking in the living room mirror. I didn't have the heart to say no. When we arrived at the courthouse, the corridor smelled of disinfectant and old paper. Plastic chairs, plaques in Latin, people clinging to folders as if they were life jackets. Giulio was already there, in a dark blue suit, sober tie, beard neatly trimmed. Next to him Chiara. Nothing flashy, nothing scandalous. Just a discreet dress, a beige coat, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I just came to support him, she said, holding out her hand. I shook it firmly enough for her to understand that my politeness was not the same as submission. Beatrice held my hand and his, one on each side. The image was almost too perfect, like an advert for a modern family that hasn't yet decided who keeps the dog. Are you okay, Piccola? Giulio asked, bending theatrically. She nodded. Yes, Dad. Then she looked at me, searching for something she couldn't yet name. Smiled. Not too much, not too little, just enough to say, I'm here. In the courtroom, the judge was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and professional patience. Next to him sat the court psychologist, a woman with a tight bun and an attentive gaze. They had the power to decide who my daughter would sleep next to most nights. It's curious how sometimes fate fits into a wooden table. The lawyers began their dance. Giulio spoke first, with that rehearsed tone of controlled indignation. My client is a present, stable father, with flexible hours and means, capable of guaranteeing the minor a structured environment. Mrs. Marta, while surely well-intentioned, shows, by her own words, difficulty managing stress, episodes of anxiety, forgetfulness. He flipped through some pages. Here, for example, an email in which she confesses to forgetting to pick her daughter up from music class. Here, a message in which she reports having lost control, crying in front of the minor. It was strange listening to my life distilled into cold sentences. I recognized every email, every message, but I didn't recognize the person he described. In all of them, the context was missing. I hadn't forgotten music class. The bus had broken down. I hadn't lost control by crying in front of Beatrice. I had explained to her that adults get sad too, that crying is nothing to be ashamed of. In his narrative, everything became incompetence. Lucia answered with the elegance of someone who has learned to use a knife like a pen. It is interesting to note, she said, that every piece of evidence presented here is in fact a trace of the mental load of the caretaker. Mrs. Marta is the only one who books appointments, replies to the school, follows treatments. It's natural that she is tired. Real negligence, Your Honor, is pretending that this does not count. My client, unlike the father, has no history of disappearing for nights, failing to answer the phone, or introducing new attachment figures abruptly into the child's life. Chiara shifted in her seat. Giulio's face hardened. I sat, listened, breathed. When the judge asked if I wanted to say anything, I could have given a fiery speech. Instead, I kept it simple. I make mistakes. Like everyone. I have forgotten times. I have cried in front of my daughter. I have given her pizza 2 nights in a row because I was exhausted. But I was always there. On the good days and the bad ones. I never outsourced the responsibility. I didn't choose the comfort of my image over her well-being. If that is what being negligent means, then maybe the word mother needs to be reviewed. I don't know if that made any difference. Judges like facts, not pretty lines. But I needed to say it, even if only to hear my own voice remind me who I was. Then came the moment when the psychologist had to talk to Beatrice. She approached her with a trained smile. Hi, Beatrice. Do you know why you're here today? My daughter looked around, her legs swinging from the high chair. Because Dad doesn't want to live with Mom anymore. The psychologist hesitated, perhaps expecting something less direct. And how do you feel about that? Beatrice shrugged. That small gesture she'd inherited from me. I don't know. I like Dad's house. There's a pool. And Chiara sometimes lets me watch cartoons until late. But, she looked at me. I like sleeping with Mum more because she knows where things are. There were muffled laughs around the room, but I knew it was much deeper than it sounded. Knowing where things are meant knowing where to put pajamas, medicine, fears. The judge jotted something down. Then came the moment that, even now, makes Giulio look away when he faces the mirror. The psychologist, following protocol, explained to Beatrice in simple words what custody meant. We just have to decide who you'll live with most, okay? You'll still see both of them, but you might spend more days with one than the other. My daughter stayed silent for a few seconds, a heavy silence full of neurons firing. Then she asked, "And who decides?" "The judge," the psychologist replied, pointing to the man at the desk. "He will decide what's best for you." Beatrice frowned. "But does he know me?" The judge smiled, embarrassed. "Not yet, but I'm getting to know you now." He thought a bit. "Does he know who woke up with me when I had a fever? Who stayed with me in the hospital when I had tests and couldn't eat? Who knows I'm afraid of the dark but not the rain?" This time the silence was universal. The judge opened his mouth and shut it again. The psychologist tried to step in. "He's going to read a lot of things about you, talk to people." Beatrice cut her off with the crystalline brutality of children. "My dad said my mum is negligent. What does that mean?" The word dropped in the room like a stone into still water. I saw Giulio's lawyer shift, uneasy, Lucia raise her chin, Chiara clutch her bag. The judge cleared his throat. "Negligent is a difficult word, Beatrice. Sometimes adults use it when they think someone isn't doing everything they should." My daughter thought a bit longer, her gaze far too serious for her 7 years. "But my mum does everything. Sometimes she cries. And then she still cleans the house. If I had to choose the exact instant when his narrative started to crumble, it would be that one. Not because of anyone's pity, not for theatrical effect, but because in that moment the judge saw something the papers didn't show. The child's view, not the disputes. "And what do you think of your mother?" the psychologist asked gently. Beatrice bit her lip. "I think she's tired." Nervous chuckles again. She went on. "But she's tired because she does everything. When I'm with Dad, he plays more. Chiara does the house stuff. My mum does the house stuff and doesn't play as much, but she tries. Sometimes she sleeps in my room when I'm sick, even if she has work the next day." "Is that negligent?" No one answered. I felt the tears rising but held them back. I didn't want to cry there. They had already seen me in every possible shade of fragility. For once, I wanted them to see me whole. The judge, maybe to regain control of the situation, asked the fatal question. "And who would you like to live with most, Beatrice? With Dad or Mum?" It was cruel. I knew it, Lucia knew it. Anyone with 2 neurons and a scrap of ethics knew that putting a child in that position was cruel. But the system loves simple answers. Beatrice looked at me, then at her father. I saw in her eyes the terror of having to choose between 2 people who, by definition, should be one single thing: home. She took a deep breath. "Can I ask a question first?" The judge nodded, perhaps too curious. "Of course." She turned to Giulio. "Dad, if I live more with Mum, will you still love me?" No lawyer in the world could have prepared a man for that question. Giulio went pale. "Of course, love. Why do you say that?" She shrugged, but her voice shook. "Because you talk about Mum like she's a bad child. Chiara does too sometimes. So I think that if I stay with Mum, maybe I'll become bad as well and you'll stop loving me." For a few seconds no one breathed. The judge took off his glasses, ran a hand down his face. The psychologist was writing furiously. Lucia looked at me with a mix of pain and pride. Chiara lowered her head. Giulio, for the first time in a long time, looked naked. Not without his suit, but without a story. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The harm he had done to his daughter with his subtle hints was there. Raw, without adjectives. Negligence had suddenly changed sides. It wasn't the tired mother scrubbing dishes at 11 at night. It was the father who planted in his child's chest the doubt that his love for her might be conditional on her making the right choice. The judge ended the hearing with a standard speech about the child's best interests, the importance of both parents, blah blah blah. We walked out of that room with more questions than answers. The decision would come in writing a few weeks later, as if fate could be delivered by mail. In the meantime, the house went into suspension. Giulio tried to slip back into the role of confident father, but something in him had cracked. He started being more careful with his words around Beatrice. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear of what the psychologist would write. Chiara disappeared from the visits for a while, so as not to confuse the child. I kept doing what I had always done. Snacks, homework, baths, medicine, scribbles on the fridge. The difference was that, for the first time, I did it all without feeling I had to prove anything to anyone. My daughter had seen, and she had said it out loud. When the ruling arrived, I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen. Beatrice was drawing at the table, tongue sticking out, focused. The brown envelope slid under the door like any other bill. My hand was shaking as I tore it open. The judge granted joint custody, but with primary residence with me. Giulio would get alternate weekends, one fixed afternoon a week, half the holidays. Paragraph after paragraph on shared responsibility, the duty to communicate, the ban on bad-mouthing the other parent in front of the child. At one point the text, in cold language, mentioned paternal conduct with potential alienating effect in presenting the maternal figure in a demeaning way to the minor. In short, his performance had been noticed. I sat down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. Beatrice, curious, asked, "Is that the judge's letter?" He nodded. "Yes." "And what did he decide?" I read it again, as if the words might change on a second read. "That you'll live mainly with me, But you'll still see Dad almost all the time. She thought for a moment. So he saw who wakes up when I have a fever. That evening, when Giulio came to pick up the papers, and with them the official version of his moral defeat, there was no scene. He came in, looked around as if he were seeing the house for the first time. Maybe noticing the invisible things. The open notebook with completed homework, Beatrice's coat hanging on the chair, the smell of soup still in the air. I handed him a copy of the sentence. He skimmed it quickly, that habit of scanning contracts. His jaw clenched when he reached the part about alienating conduct. "Congratulations," he said with a humorless smile. "You won." I took a deep breath. "I didn't win anything, Giulio. I just survived what you tried to do to me." He was about to start a speech, I could see it in his eyes, but Beatrice appeared in her bedroom doorway, in pajamas, hair still damp. "Dad!" He turned immediately, his tone changing instinctively. "Yes, love." She came closer. "I read the letter. The judge said I can stay more with Mum. Will you still love me?" The question repeated was like a parallel sentence. He knelt down, placed his hands on her shoulders. "I'll always love you, even if you lived on Mars." She frowned. "But Mum's not there." "Then I'll love you from Earth," he tried to joke. I leaned against the doorframe and watched. It wasn't my job to fix the damage he had done himself with his words. He would have to relearn how to be a father without using me as a convenient villain. With time, life found a new shape. On the days when Beatrice was with him, I discovered a strange silence in the house. At first it was an aching emptiness. I caught myself folding clothes that weren't there, making snacks no one would eat, watching the clock as if I could push the hands forward to her return. Gradually that silence became space. I started reading books that had been sitting on the shelf for years. I began drawing again, not floor plans but useless things. Imaginary facades, hands, eyes. A friend dragged me to a yoga class in a basement that smelled of cheap incense. I laughed at my own stiffness, at my inability to balance on one leg. The instructor kept saying, "Breathe, let go." I thought about lawyers, courtrooms, words like negligent. I breathed and let go, or at least tried to. At work, little by little, I stopped being the employee who's always late because of her kid, and went back to being just Marta. I joined a big project, did extra hours on the days Beatrice was with her father. My boss, surprised, called me in. "You seem like a different person, Marta." Smirked. "Maybe I am." Beatrice, for her part, started living between two homes with a wisdom I didn't have in my 30s. In ours, she knew she could cry without being called dramatic, that dinner might be late but it would come, that her favorite pajamas might still be on the clothesline but I would make up for it with a bedtime story. At her father's there was a pool, looser schedules, gifts I could never afford, and a stepmother who, over time, stopped being a threat and became just one more adult. One Sunday evening when she came back from there, she told me with the sharp naturalness of children, "Chiara argued with Dad because he came home late. She said he's negligent with her." This time it was my turn to frown. She used that exact word. Beatrice nodded. "Yes." I asked again what it means. She said it's when someone doesn't look after you properly. I thought about saying something clever, sarcastic, educational. In the end I just asked, "And do you think she's right?" Beatrice thought for a few seconds. "I think Dad is negligent with everyone sometimes." She picked up her colored pencil and went back to her drawing. "But with me he's trying. You make mistakes too, Mum. Only you learn faster." In that moment, in that ordinary kitchen, with no judge, no lawyers, no Latin on the walls, I understood the only sentence that really mattered. Hers. I could spend the rest of my life collecting reports, rulings, legal opinions. But the person who lived with me every day had already handed down her private verdict, the one that doesn't come on headed paper but guides small hands when they choose whom to hold on to in the dark. My husband asked for a divorce, saying I was a negligent mother. In court, my daughter asked if negligent was just a new word for an adult who forgets who is really looking after whom. No one had the courage to answer. Neither did I. I just took her hand later out on the street on the way home, and squeezed it tightly enough for her to understand that even if the whole world doubted it, there was a truth that needed no judge. Of all the things I've ever been accused of, loving too much has never been on the list.